And Deb, can you screen share?
Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for once again joining us on the Monday night Book of Mormon Perspectives. It's always good to see everybody and to have an opportunity to catch up. Tonight, Wanda Stubbart is our presenter, and she comes to us with lots of great stories and lots of wonderful tidbits of information to share with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and share the introduction that Paul has prepared. And it says tonight, Wanda and Kenneth Stubbart developed friendship with little Pigeon Nicholas and her children in the 1960s, well before publication of Cry of the Ancients. As long-term friends of the family, the book relating some personal interactions, especially regarding research on the Serpent Mound, remains especially meaningful to the Stubbarts and the DeBarths. Unfortunately, the kids have moved and lost contact, the last with John and his twin brother Dwayne, who was twins with Diana. Paul has asked Wanda for this presentation in part because of her personal rapport with the family, and yet the Book of Mormon message profoundly intertwines and merits your attention. The book is available on Amazon hardcover for $25, and Little Pigeon is omitted as author on the Amazon and Goodreads. Let us pray. I'm going to wait just 1 second till my clock quits chiming. Great Spirit, creator of the sacred hoop of life, we raise our faces to your gentle breeze, trusting it and you today and for all our afterlife. We thank you for those brave persons who bridge cultures like Gray Owl and Little Pigeon to gain understanding, to help generations which follow to appreciate commonalities and differences in a Zionic community expanding. And as we read Cry of the Ancients and find its treasured message of invitation to the Promised Land, we recognize our history, while troubled by our wars, moves towards peace, guided by your hand. Help us, Great Spirit, to hear your whisper, to feel, to see, to taste and touch the message of your voice, and nudge us with the beauty of creation to be good stewards by each day's. And as we attempt to do our part in response to your nudge, your daily delights, to our vision, to your call, walk with us, let us see your shadow, let your guidance be available to us all. And as we work our way through the vicissitudes and turmoils which we tend to see as strife, help us embrace that today. Each day is but a segment of your sacred hoop, the spiral encompassing eternal life. We pray in the quest to be more holy, in the name of Jesus, the Christian representative in your sacred hoop. Amen. Okay, Wanda, if you want to go ahead and start sharing, then you're going to start with the reading first. Is that correct, Wanda? You need to unmute, please. Okay, Wanda, we need you to unmute, please. Okay. And now we're seeing chapter 1.
Okay. Tonight, we're talking about a book report on Cry of the Ancients, Princess Little Pigeon and Gray Owl, who had died before Princess Little Pigeon wrote this book, but she included 2 chapters written by him at some point in their relationship. Introduction. My comments on the 29th of November, 2021 on the Zoom meeting concerning my husband's master's degree thesis on the Serpent Mound led to tonight's presentation, a collaboration between Paul DeBarth and me. It was sometime in the 1960s when I first heard Princess Little Pigeon's Clara Nicholas speak at the Columbus, Ohio North Branch of the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ. She had come to share with us things she could never have shared before with anyone outside the reservation. Her first words indicated that if she had done so earlier, she would have had her tongue cut out by her tribe. My interest was piqued primarily because she was an American Indian, and I had a maternal great-great-grandmother who was half American Indian and half French. It was always fascinated me when I hear people who have American Indian blood that manage to hear the Book of Mormon. My mother was 12 years old when she first heard of it in Southern Kentucky. She was deeply interested in the book from that time until her death, and she read it many times and taught it in adult church school classes. She had a strong testimony of its faithfulness. At one point, she said that she was praying as she studied, and she realized that the words were standing up on the page in 3D while she was reading. And that was one of her testimonies about it. So here was an Oneida tribe American Indian speaking to us of new and wonderful things we did not know about her people. The information she shared made us want to hear more from her, and a great friendship began between her family and mine. When I was teaching elementary music, she came to my schools to speak to the students, and we often visited her in Brownsville, Ohio. She also visited us in our home on many occasions. She signed our copy of the book we are reviewing as follows. To Wanda and Ken, there has been no day that your help and prayers have not upheld and sustained all of us. In Gospel Bonds, Clara, Princess Little Pigeon. Chapter 1, The Call, written by Gray Owl. He begins the chapter 1 by asking his people, "For what do we hunger?" He invites the old ones to wake from their dreaming and remember their fathers and the true glory of their past, back beyond the wars and the hatred, beyond the days of their wanderings. He calls on all the nations to search their legends, to open the door and to find their identity as a nation of people, to come to the remembrance of their fathers. For in these days, the great chief of heaven spoke to us, the gay and beautiful, the laughing, industrious, rejoicing, adventuring sons of the land, and called us his children. He sent his beloved, the morning star, the healer, to teach us to live in love together. And the great Father of all looked upon his children with sadness, and the prophecy was given. This is my fair land. With my hands and my heart have I made it, and it is dearer to me than all the lands of earth. If you cannot live by my laws, sharing in the gifts that I have given, then I will cause such enemies as you have never seen to come upon you, and they will put their feet upon your necks and grind your faces in the dust. But there was a promise too, remember? Some far day you will begin to lift your heads, And you will climb to the mountain and lift your arms, saying as one voice, Father, we are here, and I will remember. Finally, he ends the chapter with these words of wisdom. For this is wisdom, if a man lose all he has, his wealth, his country, his hopes, and still may keep his secure knowledge of himself and his worth. As a link in the chain of life, he has a rock to build upon. If all things be added unto him, wealth, position, fame, and power, and he have not the anchor of his heritage, he is an empty canoe upon the waters of life. So let us, with our memories, first seek our heritage, our lovely past. I have a little knowledge. You, my brothers, have more. Let us lift our heads and our voices, for it is time. Chapter 2, written by Clara, is What is an Indian? Clara was a master storyteller. As I sat with the book open to this chapter and began to read, I pondered how to summarize a chapter so rich in describing the contrast between the white man's idea of what an Indian is and the actual nature and character of the American Indians. I yearned to be able to read every word of the chapter to you because it was so enlightening. I urge you to get your own copy and read it for yourself. For many years, the American Indian has been misrepresented. Clara points out that white men gained their knowledge of the Indian through war, but the Indian did little to correct them. She then gave many examples of how the Indians really lived, and she pointed out why they were reticent to trust white men because of painful experiences they had suffered from them. She quotes from several sources a completely different view of the Indian from the commonly held view. For example, Columbus reported to his sponsors about his first landing. I swear to your majesties that there is not a better people in the world than these, more affectionate, affable, and mild. They love their neighbors as themselves. Their language is the sweetest, the softest, and the most cheerful, for they always speak smiling. And that's taken from Timothy R. Jenkins, The 10 Tribes of Israel, pages 103 and 104. The most interesting quote that might be most related to our forum comes from a book by James Adair, The History of American Indians. It is a very difficult thing to divest ourselves, not to say other persons, of prejudices and favorite opinions. And I expect to be censured by some for opposing commonly received sentiments. But truth is my object. From the most exact observations I could make in the long time I traded among the American Indians, I was forced to believe them literally descended from the Israelites. And that was on page 13 of his book. The last quotation is from Smith's History of New Jersey, page 130. They are very loving to one another. If several came to a Christian's house, and the master of it gave to one of them victuals and none to the rest, he would divide it into equal shares among his companions. If the Christian visited them, they would give them the first cut of their victuals. They never ate the hollow of the thigh of anything they killed. And if a Christian stranger came to one of their houses in their towns, he was received with the greatest hospitality, and the best of everything was set before him. Clara ends the chapter with this. So we find many of our preconceived notions going up the smoke of the campfire. The picture up here is a picture of a man reading the wampum. And this chapter was describing what the main purpose of the wampum was in their tribe. The picture above illustrates the hands of a man reading a wampum belt, which served the dual purpose of preserving an honorable record of one's ancestors and also of accounting for the passage of time. That's on page 29 of this book. Illustration is by Dan Nicholas, her oldest son, page 26. He did several pen and ink drawings throughout the book. The main use of the wampum belt was to keep a record on strips into which beads were woven with thought patterns or ideographs in those pages 27 and 28. The shells from which beads were made were hard to get. It was even harder to work the shells into beads. In a collection of wampum belts, every generation is represented. When the wampum is read at the death of a chief, the readers begin with the chief preceding the deceased and go back generation by generation. To illustrate how to estimate the span of time covered at such a reading, Clara cites one instance in which teams of men reading without interruption for 9 days and 9 nights were required to complete the history. And it was a rare generation that required more than a belt or two to tell its part of the story. If my memory serves me right, I believe Clara was referring to the reading of the wampum belts on the occasion when Gray Owl died. I remember her telling that story when I first heard her speak. Gray Owl was an honorary chief of the Oneida tribe, and his wampum belt had something to do with going out from the reservation to help his people. And so this would be woven in various shapes and other idea formations to illustrate what that person's life goal was. Chapter 4 discusses a missing wampum for one of the tribes. In this chapter, Clara expresses her extreme frustration over the refusal to return the belts, covering 1700 to 1800 of the Onondaga tribe. The controversy had not yet been resolved at the time of this book's publication. She discusses the difficulty of trying to convince the university personnel of the importance of these historic records to the native people. She writes an analogy of how the white man would feel if the situation of defending their history were reversed and all the things they held dear were placed in a museum and a false narrative of their story was presented to visitors and used in school curricula. Perhaps they would react as she did, with great indignation at the futility of trying to explain the importance of restoring the truth of their history. She says, many things we reveal to those who seem sincerely interested, but the wampum has never been read in the presence of an outsider. It was part of the character of the wampum from ages past that it be read only to the initiated and only on certain occasions. Chapter 5, she discusses their search that they began. In chapter 5, Clara speaks her discovery of the library bus and the effect of the discovery on her search. She states, a neighbor had introduced me to a remarkable invention, the library bus, and I had come home loaded to the eyebrows with books. Among them was a very old copy of Howe's Historical Collections of Ohio. She and Gray Owl began their search to discover anything they could about the history of the Indians. Their first discovery from Howe was the story of a farmer near Newark, Ohio. If you come from Columbus, you pronounce that word Newark. That's the way Ohioans say Newark. Who found a curious stone-lined cavity. He lifted out a small stone case and found inside a bar about 9 inches long, also of stone, on which was carved a figure of a man, bearded and robed. On the back and sides were deep scratches, which he supposed to be some kind of writing. The writings were eventually taken to a Jewish rabbi in Cincinnati who pronounced the writings as Hebrew. It appeared to be the Ten Commandments in a style of writing in use before the Babylonian captivity. Clara goes on to say, the story so sparked our curiosity that it sent us again and again, years upon years, searching out old books to see if there were any other finds. As soon as our day's work was done and the little ones safely in bed, we flew to our books to read and talk far into the night. She says it took them years to find the stone figure. It was located in a museum at Coshocton, Ohio. That was not far from their home. Their son Daniel, the artist, was lecturing there and stood entranced before the case. The curator expressed doubts about its authenticity. Dan replied emphatically that it was authentic, all right. Occasionally, they or their neighbors would bring in a newspaper clipping about some scholar's interpretation of a relic. The family would chuckle, well, they're getting warm. Here's a poem by Daniel to end the chapter. From the lands of past far distant, call the ancients to their people. Mid the rubble long forgotten, cry the voices long in slumber. On the winds, the whisper travels over plains across the prairies, echoing from the great tall mountains far across the flowing rivers. Thus the cry goes onward, seeking for the old man and the young man, for the children born and unborn, and the women in their labor. Forget not us who went before you in your tales around the campfire. Let us live in all our glory in the songs that we have taught you. Thus the ancients cry their message from the lands of past far distant. Mid the rubble long forgotten, cry their voices long in slumber. Chapter 6 refers to legends and traditions. I'll ask Robert if he wants to read now. How
In
about
this
that?
short chapter, Clara explains the main difference between legends and traditions. She also describes the role of the storyteller as the carrier of the news in the days before radio, TV, and newspapers. The tribes greeted the storyteller with enthusiasm. They also relied on him for tales of interest to all ages. The difference between legends and traditions seems to be that legends were told and shared from tribe to tribe, while traditions were held sacred to the particular band and held inviolate and unchangeable. The origins of traditions are hidden by the passage of time, and we no longer question why or how they began. What I have chosen to write are those stories that I personally have heard, which have to do with historical or sacred memories.
Chapter 7, the Chickasaw-Choctaw Migration. This chapter includes 2 descriptions of the migration of the Chickasaw-Choctaw. The main events are very similar. In both, the migration begins far to the southwest. That kind of coincides with what we heard last week, by the way. Choctaw says Old Mexico. The first story says that they carried a rod of a sapling, and the second that they carried a pole. In the first story, they were to plant the rod at night and see which way it pointed in the morning. The rod always bent eastward. When the rod stood straight and true, they would know they had found their new land. In the second story, they were to plant the pole, and they were to follow the pole when it pointed eastward until it stood erect. Then they were to remain in that place and make it their home. In both stories, the people came to a great river. The first story does not reveal where the rod stood straight and true, but the second reveals that the pole stood erect in Mississippi. That is where the people separated and became the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations. There's a third story about the migration of the Lenni Lenape. It can be found in a rare book, Inquiry into the Origin of the Antiquities of America by John Delafield, Jr. And that was published in New York at Colt Burgess and Company in 1839. After they won a fierce battle with the Allegui, this group settled far to the north and eastward. Chapter 8, she gives a brief description of the use of tobacco and the legend of the pipe. Today's consumption of tobacco is a far cry indeed from the use to which it was put in the old days. It was the incense of the cedar shavings that was supposed to be pleasing to God. The tobacco merely kept the embers smoldering and produced the smoke on which it rose. The legend of the coming of the peace pipe indicates that it was intended as a sort of portable altar. Anyone who touched the pipe must be prepared to keep the pledge of peace. The story of a council between enemies indicates that no warrior would touch the pipe when it was passed until a woman with a baby got too close and the laughing baby touched the pipe. The warriors followed in shame, and peace was at once established and firmly kept. Chapter 9 is the tradition of the clans. Clara begins this chapter with this statement. Students of Indian history sooner or later become involved in the complicated riddle of tribes and sub-tribes. She goes on to explain how some tribes became extinct and others either divided or merged along the way. The original name of the Oneida tribe was Onayoteka-Ona, which means the people of the standing stone. This name came from the legend of their long migration. It was said that at every place they settled, there was an upright stone. When they found it necessary to move on, they would find the stone awaiting them at a newly designated home site. Clara expresses surprise that scholars who can reel off names of tribal groups but pay so little attention to the clans of the tribes, which in certain ways are more important than the tribe. A traveling Indian may mention to another Indian the name of the tribe from which he comes. The information will be greeted with polite smiles and possibly a gracious inclination of the head in acknowledgement of the greatness of that nation. If, however, the traveler wears upon his garments the token of his clan, someone may leap joyfully out of a crowd, clamp him in quick and eager kinship and whisper, "Me also." She tells of a building of impressive dimensions unearthed in Central America that was decorated with a frieze of marching turtles on the cornice. It was given the name House of the Turtle. An old tradition among North American Indians tells of a great migration of the serpent people led by the turtle. It was wise for the planners of the Exodus to enlist as guides and protectors a powerful warrior band. It is said by the old people having successfully made the circuit of the Great Gulf and having fought their way through untold wilderness and savage conflicts, they came at last into a place of pleasant valleys, peaceful streams, and tree-clad slopes. It was truly a land flowing with milk and honey. Here they paused long enough to build a mighty memorial to the serpent led by the turtle. The effigy mound in southern Ohio has been variously described as a snake with an egg in its mouth, a symbol of creation and nonsense too fantastic to repeat. Nowhere in Indian serpent legends could we find reference to an egg, but a turtle. And here is the chapter where she describes the migration of the serpent people. And I'm saying that because we are limited in time, I'll read it. I will read the chapter that brings us back to the subject that inspired this book report. And then I will skip a number of chapters, included the report with an excerpt from the final chapter in the words of Grial. This chapter begins with the legend of the serpent people. Very long ago, a people lived far to the south who were forced to flee from their powerful and cruel enemies. These people had many towns and villages and were very numerous, but they were a gentle people. And now the rulers had become corrupt and oppressive. It is said that they went first to Turtle, who was very wise in all the ancient knowledge. He agreed to lead them on their journey. Bear also accompanied them to protect them with his strength. Crane was of the party because of his knowledge of the water, and Wolf was to scout and warn them of their enemies. And here's the drawing by Dan Nicholas. The turtle is right down here, and the crane is standing over here, and the bear and the wolf. Just a beautiful rendition of that. These people were of the serpent nation, and according to their custom, they fasted, prayed, and performed certain rituals to prepare for their journey. It is said that they traveled a great water close to shore on their rafts. At last, they landed and turned northward into the wilderness. They traveled for many months and suffered much hunger. At last, Turtle in his wisdom spoke to them. It is because we are so many that the game is fleeing before us, and we shall all die of hunger. Here we shall separate into smaller bands, and each will take its own direction. The people began to murmur and to grieve that they would never see their relatives again. Still, it was wisdom that they part company. So it was decided to build a great monument. In the years to come, perhaps their children would pass this way and remember a time when they were all brothers. I will tell you how I first saw the serpent mound and what it meant to me. The legend of the migration of the serpent people was one of many we had heard in our childhood and in our travels. As we found mounds and effigies, there was always the hope that somewhere a great monument might exist. Oddly enough, we had heard the various theories regarding the egg in its mouth. We were very perplexed about this. It had no meaning at all for us. The serpent we could understand. The Indian knows that there's no such thing as an Indian race. We are several races, and not all of us come from the same place or at the same time. But there is one definite and definitive separation between those who came by water and those who came by land. Those who came across the land bridge are coyote. Those who came by water are serpent. It is very hard to put into English the meaning and power of those names. Though the two were bitter enemies, neither of the terms implied any disparagement of those who bore them. I would like to mention here that when she first told us about this distinction, she mentioned that the serpent people wore fringes on their garments to distinguish them from the coyote people. To most Americans, the coyote is something of a pest, skulking and sly. To an Indian, he's a token of fleetness and stamina. He has the innate ability to organize pursuit or retreat. A serpent is now the epitome of evil, the very personification of Satan himself. To our people, he is the symbol of wisdom, and holy wisdom at that. So it was that I came blindly to my first visit to the Serpent Mound. It was a lovely Sunday morning. We were all in a very gay mood as we set out after church for a picnic lunch at the state park a short drive away. By the way, she was attending Lancaster branch at that time. We trooped across the beautiful lawns and climbed the visitor's tower. I looked at legend come alive, for there beneath me I saw not an egg, unless an egg has a head, but the turtle and the serpent. My eyes filled with tears, and I wished, oh, how I wished that gray owl were still with me. My companions were full of questions, and I pointed to the small triangular mound at the front of the egg. That, I said, is the head of a turtle. I am sure of it. I am turtle and have many times woven the symbol of my clan and the beadwork for my family. The triangular head is the only possible way to make a turtle out of a simple oval. We trooped down and into the museum, and there on the wall were drawings of the mound as it had looked originally. There was the great serpent, coiling sinuously. There in its one wide flung jaws was a great oval-shaped mound with the small triangular shape at the front. But there were also long legs extending from the back of the oval and stretching beyond the jaws of the serpent. Now there could be no doubt. The turtle sign is used almost universally among Indian tribes. It's a common name with a descriptive word: little turtle, sleeping turtle, and so on. There are turtle clans in many tribes. The shape of the shell and the position of the limbs are used to denote descriptive terms. For instance, an octagon-shaped shell with all the legs withdrawn may indicate a sleeping turtle. The shell is variously depicted as oval, octagon, or occasionally even a square. But if you want to say, this turtle is traveling, going somewhere, there's only one way to do it: lengthen the back legs. One of the elders of the church, that would be my husband, working forward toward his master's degree at the university, was intrigued with the new explanation of the effigy and wanted to use it in a term paper. The only drawback was that he needed a reference. He finally suggested that somewhere there might be some old Indian who knew the beliefs of our people and who could be quoted as an authority. I am afraid I laughed to suddenly realize that I am an old Indian, but I could speak only for my own beliefs. With much more enterprise than I would have ever had, this young man located an old Indian in Pennsylvania and wrote to him. He simply asked if there were anything the Indian could tell about the Serpent Mound in Ohio. When the reply came back, he brought the letter to me. With wonder and excitement, I read almost the same story I had told, except that the writer remembered going with his people to this place to dance at the great memorial, for it was holy ground. Knowledge of our past increases year by year as we who were lost to each other become reunited. Will we, when all truth is revealed, sift fact from legend and know the origin of our clans, our fathers? And now I'm at the last chapter that Gray Owl has written to his people. To end the book, Clara inserts more of Gray Owl's writings. Near the beginning of the chapter is a great discussion of the search for truth as summarized in this quotation from page 194. And all the ologies, and we amass tons of facts and figures, and here and there a sage arises with a theory. Sometimes it is a logical idea, and man goes trooping after the sage and lifts him up and worships the theory that he has made. Then in the course of time, the theory is proven false. The sage is cast down and called a fool. Still, some shred of truth is salvaged and added to new knowledge, and a new theory, a new sage arises. A shred of truth. Here a line, there a line. To end the chapter, Rael speaks to his people. Robert, can you read some of this?
O my brothers, in all the world, is there another people who can understand better than you the truth of this precept? Here a little, there a little. You of all people know there is a Father God who set the stars upon their courses and who made the earth and all its creatures, including man. You have lived out your generations in the firm and sure knowledge of his presence and his love. If it were not so, you would have died as the buffalo. Tribulation has come in accordance with the prophecy, and the promise is just as sure. Is not this a covenant requiring only your willingness to live by his ancient and unchangeable laws to bring it to its fulfillment?
Go ahead, keep reading.
Okay, I've got this blocked a little here, so hang on. Then I speak sternly to you, my brothers, for many of you are being led away by false teachers. You have caught the disease of impatience. You blame the Christian churches and say that their religion is not for you. In this, you are somewhat right. The narrow doctrine that lifts one line from the universal truth and says that this is all, truly this is not for you. For you, nothing but this wide and windswept truth of the Almighty God will suffice. But before you turn your backs upon the scriptures and upon Jesus the Christ, before you trade one half truth for another, remember well the things of your fathers. Now that we have learned to read for ourselves, my brothers, we cannot use the excuse that the churches teach false doctrines. You have read the scriptures and found them wanting? Then you have not read them with the knowledge of history of your race as a magnifying glass. Read again the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Read them to your ancient ones, for they were duplicated in our village habit from long ago. Read and recognize Joseph the dreamer, who sired a race of dreamers. Read the prophecies of these latter days. They will speak to you with clear voices, you who have lived with dreams and prophecies.
Read the history as you would read the wampum, and meet at last the Son of Heaven. Have false teachers presented him to you as a meek and lowly small-time teacher confined to a small corner of Palestine? Or have you been led to believe him another agent enfranchised by the government? In all fairness, we cannot blame him if men have read this into his story. His ministry in that far-off land was so pitifully short. And of course, his friends and followers knew him only as their dear Lord, there in their own community. One brief time records his saying, "Other sheep have I not of this fold, I go to them." Another says, "I have come to redeem Israel." Remember that word, redeem means to reclaim. It does not mean to replace. But all of Israel was not in that corner of Palestine. At that time, only Judah was present. The history of Israel ceased in 722 BC with the fall of Samaria. Israel was lost. lost to the world, but not to God, who knows, as Jesus says, when even a sparrow falls. Perhaps he said more, we do not know. Perhaps his followers were much like men today, full of their own community troubles, and wrote only. But let us examine his credentials, his titles: the Son of God, the great physician, wise counselor, the bright and morning star. The truths he taught are more relevant today than anything that has been written since time began. Love, truth, justice, compassion, hope, faith, wisdom. Prophet, beloved of your fathers, Thunderbird, bringing the precious virtues as a gift from heaven, so that men might live in peace together. Truth, honor, wisdom, faith, patience, loyalty. To the old ones, he was the morning star, perfect in truth. He had many names according to our various languages, but always the memory is plain. A pale prophet with copper-colored hair and sea green eyes and a beard. Legend says he had power over wind and water and could command even the stones to stand upright. Sometimes he is found at the council fires telling stories of a land far away. And this is truth. We did not kill him. He left us in friendship, promising to return in the fullness of time. Oh yes, my brothers, the scriptures are true, and Christ is true, but there is more. Our old ones also left a record. They left it in your memories and also in writings secretly buried, the history of their wanderings upon the face of this land, their wars, their kings and councils, and their encounter with Christ, the beloved. This too, for your instruction, read. I believe the Book of Mormon, as it is called. I approached it in anger that white men should have found it in its safe place in the earth and brought it forth. I said, it is our history. And then I read the words of that unhappy, lonely leader with his people dead before him on the plain, calling down the ages to the last unhappy remnant of the seed. Remember. And because the legends and the prophecies have been like my daily bread in my life, I could believe that only by the power of God could our record be brought forth into the light of day. I am saddened when I find that those to whom it was entrusted tend to forget the purposes for which it was given, when they begin to substitute worldly power for the plain and precious truth. Nevertheless, the record is true. And because it is true, because we insist that our fathers had been given truth from heaven, we stand in danger of his judgment when we quarrel about his truth. What cruelties man has inflicted on his fellow man in the resurrector's name. Cutting of tongues, blinding, maiming, the death of children, the destruction of mind and memory. Such is the arrogance and conceit of the conqueror and the age-long despair of the conquered. How dare you, Christian, war with Christian? Worse still, how dare you, my brothers, yourselves, Christian or traditionalist, who think you that you worship? Why do you divide yourselves over a name? Over the mouthings of invective, over the noise of battle, comes the voice of the Son of Heaven. Love your brother. The seed of Abraham is scattered far and wide, and across the world our cousins stir and waken to the promise that when we open our hearts to the knowledge of our fathers, when we recognize ourselves for what we are and accept our obligation to in the covenant, then, oh, then we will come out of our misery and despair, our hopelessness and facelessness. Okay, Robert, take over again. We're almost done.
The voices of our grandparents call to us from the dust we tread beneath our feet. Remember God, the Maker, who made you, brothers. Look back upon the wars and hatred and remember. So shall it be when all our histories unfold in one unbroken scroll. We shall see the power and glory of truth so plain that others will see it through our reawakened eyes. Then, as our prophecy foretold, we will climb to the mountains and lift wide our arms, crying with one voice across the world, Father, we are here. And he will answer, Israel.
Okay, now, how do we get it out of here? Oh, good.
There you go.
Thank you. That is the end. Now, if you want to hear the rest of the book reviewed, you'll have to talk to Farley Barth because he wanted to include other chapters, and that's just was too much for one night. So
I very much appreciate the summation that you've offered, Wanda, and the help that you've given, Robert. It is, in my estimation, a fine book. Unfortunately, I have such fond memories of Little Pigeon and primarily her four youngest, the two sets of twins, that those memories are outstanding, even with the refreshment of Cry of the Ancients. But I had the privilege of inviting them to Shawnee Mission to speak to my classes. And the boys, James and John and Dwayne and Diane, all danced and entertained my students and taught them a lot. And to be able to reflect upon that by this well-written book and be able to tie it back to the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum is a pleasure for me. And I thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not going to ask any questions. I would note that the Temple of the Turtles that you mentioned is in the city of Uxmal in the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's tied to another story, but nonetheless, the significance of the turtle and the serpent is an international one of great significance. And so let me call attention to you all that if you hit the appropriate button, then Deb does an excellent job of monitoring, and I'll step back and listen too.
Thanks, Wanda, for all your work on that. That was a wonderful presentation.
thank you. I enjoyed reading it again, but I knew I could not complete it all in one night. So I wanted to make the Book of Mormon parts the most prominent. So, and I think it tied in well to the comments on the Jaredites last week. And some of the things that were brought out about their possible location. Because every time Little Pigeon referred to it, or Clara, as we called her, she always mentioned that they came from far to the south on the western side, and that they came up by way of the Gulf of Mexico, also up the Mississippi River, and then on the Ohio River, and that's how they came into the southern part of Ohio and made their serpent mound. When I mentioned that in my in the meeting where I mentioned my husband's master's thesis, I think 3 or 4 people required me to send them his thesis. which I have on my computer, so I've edited it a good many times since he wrote it. And he wanted to add. So it's not true thesis. I mean, we changed a few things afterwards. I want to ask you a question. Did you see all the comments that came up that said my internet was unstable? Or was I the only one that saw that?
You were the only one that could see that, to my knowledge. I did not see it.
Okay, because it's just did it again. But in spite of all that, I haven't lost my connection, which is a good thing.
Praise the Lord for that one. Brian thanks you for your interesting presentation.
You will get a copy of the PowerPoint. I noticed a typo on the last page, and it said tut or something like that when it should have said but. So if you get it, maybe you can edit it yourself. But at least you'll know what the word was. So really, is there any question that you can ask me over that small amount, or was there sufficient information?
Ed has his hand up. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay.
You'll need to unmute, please. You're not unmuted yet.
I finally found
There
my,
you are. Oops.
I think we can hear you now.
okay.
Yes.
Wanda, that was a worshipful experience. I've never been acquainted with that book before.
Oh, you would love to read the whole thing, but I especially wanted to read their words on those 2 chapters and not try to summarize it, because I felt that it was all meaningful.
I made one demanding note to myself. It says, buy the book from Amazon.
Good for you. I know you'll enjoy it, and you'll enjoy the other pictures that Dan Nicholas put in there as well.
Well, what you presented tonight was such a powerful testimony regarding the Book of Mormon. I don't know why this book is required reading of every member or every believer. That was my impression.
You notice that he scolded us for not carrying out the purpose for which we were given the Book of Mormon.
That's right.
So we need to be a little more attentive to that. And I don't know how much more I can do at my age. But at least I can still read and I can still write, and that's good.
Yes.
I wish I had the voice to go with it so it wouldn't sound so gravelly to you. But I haven't conquered the allergies yet. I can sing better than I can talk. So I could sing you some of the songs I wrote for the Book of Mormon course I wrote. If you want to learn them.
Well, I can
Keep a copy of it.
All the years that I've worked on the Book of Mormon, I believe the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. It was during the time that I worked on it that I was truly educated and converted. But I never knew that the Indian nations or clans were so aware and And
Those headbands they wore, I didn't cover that part, but Clara said that with the headbands they wore, they never realized until they found that stone or that piece of cloth in Newark, Ohio, which I call NERC because that's what people around here call it. And they also call Columbus.
uh-huh,
So a lot of them come from Southern Kentucky, you know.
uh-huh.
And my parents came from there, and you would be surprised if I had read that in hillbilly language. You wouldn't have recognized the words probably. But anyway, yes, but anyway, she said when she noticed that they held the 10 Commandments, she was not aware of that, but they wear them on their heads. And I think they have the symbolism for the commandments, or else they carry one with that actual Hebrew version in it. I suppose some of you have heard of many instances where they've been found in various parts of the United States, and they contain that same thing. Well, it looks like Monty wants to say something.
Yep, Monty and then Marlene.
I wanted to add one thing to that. I didn't realize the extent to which they have kept quiet about what they know.
Mhm.
And because they have kept quiet, many people who believe in the Book of Mormon are, at least speaking from my perspective, would be completely in the dark about how to talk with someone from the Indian nation.
Exactly.
And this changed my attitude in that regard tremendously. So go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, Monty.
Well, I
Okay.
just want to say I thoroughly enjoyed that tonight. And for myself, personally, I would like to hear the rest of the story.
Oh,
If
yeah.
Wanda would have time to bring that to us sometime, I, for one, would certainly appreciate it. But I just want to tell her, don't knock us hillbilly folks. We're from Southern Illinois, and we get accused of being that all the time. So,
Well, I don't dislike it. When my husband used to say when I went home to see my parents, he had to teach me how to talk again.
I'm used to hearing this all the time. When we go up in Northern Illinois, they want to know what part of the South are you from? Like, we're maybe down in Louisiana or Mississippi, something like that. But, when you're raised, it's however you're raised and where you're raised. And it kind of sticks with you. I have tried to correct some of the things, like don't say winders anymore. Say windows, this kind of thing. But
Well,
anyway.
When I learned to read, I kind of learned how to pronounce the words a little more correctly. But I remember my dad, he was a fiddler, and he would get his bow up here and he'd say, rosin on the bow, and here we go.
Those were those good old days, I tell you. I love it.
I used to accompany him on the piano when I was 8 years old because his friends couldn't always come and play with him, So he taught me how to make a chord on the piano, and I was already I had 2 years of piano lessons between the first and third grade. And once he taught me that, I could go around the circle of fifths pretty fairly and accompany most of those songs because they mostly took 3 chords. And I could do it in every key. So that was nice.
I have a feeling you have lots of wonderful stories you could tell us. But I certainly appreciated that tonight. Thank you so very, very much.
You're welcome. Monty, you're still waiting.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated your presentation tonight. And I was going to ask, where do you get that book?
Well, Paul had it up on the screen. I think it was from Amazon, wasn't it?
Oh, if it's from Amazon, then I can get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it
He
said
said
it
it
was
was
$25 for hard
$25.
copy.
Uh-huh.
You might try well, I don't know if they would have it in that restoration bookstore.
I don't know, but you know, it would still be something I could pursue on Amazon. 'Cause
Yes.
if it's out there, they'll have it.
Just go do a search for it. And
The other
maybe
thing
it'll
I-
show
about
up.
that message you've been
If I
getting up
can-
on your screen.
Maybe Paul can tell you again.
Yeah.
If I can get
one of
in
my
on the
neighbors-
discussion here.
Oh, okay.
Monty, if you pull it up on Amazon or many other sources, you'll get a message that says gray owl or Washa Kwan Asin from the Ojibwe, meaning great horned owl or great gray owl, was the name Archibald Bettany adopted when he took on a First Nations identity as an adult. A British native, he was most notable as an author and one of the most effective apostles of the wilderness. While his writing showed, so really the publishers are misattributing and do not give Gray Owl and Little Pigeon the credit that they deserve for writing this book. And
This was published by
First,
the
this,
Herald House.
offer this lie about them, about Belani, and it's a bunch of baloney. But again, it's a sad distortion that Cry of the Ancients is not being appropriately represented by Gray Owl and Little Pigeon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also going to tell
But it
you
is
that,
available.
okay,
Go ahead.
that message you kept getting up on your screen about your, having problems with your internet.
Mhm.
Well, one of my neighbors up here got the bright idea that he named his website. When you're looking at, I'm trying to set up a new device on the web, and you're trying to get it to search for your website, and all these other websites come up. Well, one of our neighbors has his website named FBI Surveillance Van.
That's
So
creative.
it's kind of looking out the windows, see if you see a van out there somewhere,
Mhm.
One of my favorite characters on Gunsmoke was Festus Hagen. So you could talk about hillbilly. That was it.
Well, I keep trying to look at you people, and the next thing I know, you move to some other spot.
Okay, Joetta, we'll get to you in just a minute, but somebody did put a comment in, Gary put a comment in that perhaps Paul Ludy, the gentleman that has such a fantastic collection of books, that you may be able to reach out to Paul and see about that. And Aspie, I believe the name of the book is The Cry of the Ancients, isn't it,
It
Wanda?
just starts with Cry of the Ancients.
Cry of the Ancients.
Yeah, I can type that in here for you.
Okay. Aspie was inquiring about it. So Joetta, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was going to say Paul Ludy, and Monty, I can help you with that phone number if you need it, by the way. I wanted to thank Wanda so much for sharing with us tonight, because my family, we crossed paths with the writers of the book, and all I can remember is a bunch of their kids piling in my car one night, and we all went someplace. So aside from all the good stuff that's in that book, I remember some pleasant moments, and I just appreciated so much hearing it tonight, and it made me want to go get that book out and read it again. So thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome.
Joetta, could you share that phone number in the chat, or is that a private number?
No, it's not a private number, but I'm going to have to find it. And if I can, I'll go look and see what I can do. So.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to tell you that this has been quite a feat for me to get this accomplished, because we just had my husband's memorial service a week ago, Saturday. And I'm still paying bills and getting payments for his long-term care and things like that. So I've had a lot of things to do. And after the service, I got busy and I was about at chapter 4 or 5 or something. And I had to write the rest of it this week.
Well, thank you so much for that
So,
dedication and
last
commitment
week.
to our group. Thank you.
Anyway, I was a course developer in my second career, major career. So I'm used to writing and summarizing things and trying to make them shortest way possible.
Okay,
But I left out a lot of good things in there.
okay, well, maybe in the next presentation.
Yeah, I might.
We'll
Well,
rope
I
you
thought
in,
Paul
Pat.
might like to do the chapters he was interested in for the next one.
Okay, it looks
Because
like,
he was interested in a lot more information about various tribes and so forth.
okay, looks like Rick has a question for you or a comment. Go ahead,
Okay,
Rick.
Rick, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks Wanda for presenting that. This is what the cover looks like,
Yep,
Oops.
I have one here too.
right? And if you didn't, yeah, that's it. If you didn't know, she also wrote another one, Children of the Ancient Ones.
What's
Cry
the-
of the Ancients, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, she wrote several books. One of them was called Skittles and I forget. It was Slings and Skittles or Skittles and Slings. And she told a lot of the funny stories. But I wanted to tell you one of the funny stories she told us about her husband. She said he liked to go hunting for skunks. And one day he went with his brother, I think he said, and he finally found the skunk's hole. And he reached in and grabbed the head and the tail at the same time. And he kind of went down in the hole a little bit. And he was a pretty big sized guy. So she said, here he was down in the hole and his brother wasn't anywhere around. And he couldn't let go of the head or the foot or the back, the tail, because he didn't want to suffer the consequences. So he had to wait there for quite a while until his brother showed up and could dig him out of the hole carrying the skunk. That's the kind of story she told of the children in my music classes. And she told other funny stories about life on the reservation.
Okay,
that
for
we
those of
enjoy.
you who know how to do the chat, thank you, Joetta. She's put in Paul Luty's phone number and his email address. So
Yeah.
he is one source to possibly find the book if you want to get that out of the chat box.
I suspect that mine will go in there when I've left this mortal sphere, because I'm going to contact him. I have so many books on the Book of Mormon, you wouldn't believe how many books. I have the coloring books and everything. So
Hey, Wanda,
Mhm.
one of the chapters that you covered had a lot of quotes or statements by Gray Owl.
yes,
What chapter was that, please?
that was chapter 29, the last chapter in the book.
Okay, Gray Owl to his people. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I left out just a few paragraphs of that because
Okay.
I timed it and it was just about the right length, the way I had it. So yeah, that's the last one.
I would add another reflection is because I got to hear her numerous times. And one of the more charming accounts that I recall was that shortly after they moved off the reservation, he got a job working at a
Oh,
big
yes.
factory.
Right.
You
Go
want to go ahead and cover that? Well,
No, you tell it.
probably have better audio than I do.
Well, they
Well,
came down from
she
the
discovered
reservation.
after,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go on.
he got a job in the factory, and so it was some weeks, maybe even months after he got that job that she discovered that none of the other women brought their family and picnic and wait for her husband to come out again. But she would take the children, and they would play in the grasslands on the woods around the factory, and stay waiting for Grail to come back. And there was a long time before they discovered that no other women did that.
Well,
And she found it
yeah,
very interesting. Women didn't.
Do you know why she told that story or why they did that? She said he worked at a factory for an automobile factory in Detroit. And there was a park across the street. But in their tribes, if the men went out to garden or something like that, the woman would go with all the children and entertain them until he was through. And then they would come home together. So that's why she was doing this, because she thought everybody did that. It took her a long time, and she packed lunches for them all, and she had 14 kids altogether
Oh, my goodness.
between the two of them, because they got married after their spouses died.
Wow.
So she had 7 and he had 7. And that's the way they went.
Amazing.
They had 2 sevens. That's double completion.
But
Yes, that's right.
Did-
In Hebrew.
did a very good job of highlighting the difficulty
Yeah.
of becoming cross-cultural.
Yeah. It took them quite a while to be acclimated, and she never knew about that library bus, but I was tickled at how tickled she was when she found it, and had books up to her eyebrows. She said, I bet she had them loaded all the way up to carry back in the house. I don't know if you knew what kind of house they lived in, but they had to keep moving the beds to keep the kids from getting rained on.
Oh, my.
They were so poor.
Wow.
And mainly she made her money making beadwork.
Oh, wow.
I have several examples that she gave me of necklaces and things like that.
Hmm.
So, anybody else have a comment or question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't understand, Wanda, what you were saying about the headband and the stone mosaic representation in the ancient Jewish inscription.
It had the 10 Commandments in it. When they had someone in Cincinnati translate it.
Well, I was aware of that, but I didn't, but you said something about a headband.
Yeah, the headband. The people found in one of their digs, they found a piece of cloth that was shaped to fit on the head. And she said the Indians always made theirs out of beadwork strips.
Hmm.
And they had the same thing enclosed in it. But she said she never had realized that it was from the Old Testament.
So they had a copy made in beads of the
They just
Hebrew
make
writing.
it fancy, and you can see in her pictures, I think. Here
So
she
now-
is with her headband on.
Okay, is that in the book?
Yeah, it's right in the front page or on the cover,
Oh, okay, good.
the paper cover.
I'll get it with
Wait a
the
minute,
book.
can you see that?
I can't really, but my eyes aren't that good.
Well, if you see a black thing, that's her dress.
Uh-huh.
And
I
then she
see,
has
I
her
see a headband,
pigtails,
yes.
and at the top of her head is that beaded headband. And she said she never realized the significance of it until she heard that story about that discovery.
Didn't the Jews wear a
They-
box on a headband?
Yes,
Was that also the 10 Commandments?
yes, that's what they found in the one they discovered in the United States near Newark, Ohio.
This is a remarkable confirmation of the Book of Mormon.
It is. And there are other chapters where they talk more about, where she talks more about the Book of Mormon. But it was a long chapter and I didn't have time to include it, but yes, it's in there too. She talks to the churches and how they should approach the Indians. So that
Mhm.
would be another good chapter for you to read if you get your hands on the book.
I guess you could learn to wear a headband.
Hmm?
I guess one could learn to wear a headband.
Yeah, there's been a lot of those discovered in the United States, but I can't tell you where they were.
Hmm.
I haven't studied that too much.
It's very, very interesting.
I've
Okay.
just heard of them.
Well, I do here an analog here because the Jews, as of today, when they go in the synagogue, they have to wear a special headband and special bands on their
Exactly.
wrist, prayer bands with a special shawl, and only then they can pray.
Right.
But I didn't realize as now that the thing that was on their forehead, the square box, were connected to the Ten Commandments
Yes.
and so connected to the Book of
Well,
Mormon.
and
I mean,
some of them had some parts of Deuteronomy in them as well. Hear, O Israel. It starts that way in Deuteronomy.
Hmm.
The Lord is one God. And then it goes on to teach them the things that they should do. So, yeah. Well, I haven't had a lot of time to study in the last few years, but I keep going back to these good books occasionally when I get a chance. It's a little harder to read when you've had cataract surgery. You have to use a magnifying glass,
Absolutely.
almost, for the fine print.
I took my wife to get cataract surgery. We went to the surgeon's office and they asked her to fill out some forms. The writing on the forms was so small, neither one of us could read it. So I went to the receptionist and I said, this is a place for restoring vision, right? She said, yes. I said, you know, this is written so small that people who come in here with bad vision can't possibly read it. And she said, I'll report it to the home office.
That's ironic. That's the way it is. Well,
Wanda, is it 20 after 10 your time?
it's 24 after right now.
Okay, 24 after.
Yeah. I was going to sing you a song out of my book here. I'll sing a benediction to you.
Okay.
And now I would that ye should be humble and be submissive and gentle, easy to be entreated, and full of patience and long suffering, being temperate in all things, being diligent in keeping God's commandments at all times, asking for whatsoever things ye stand in need, and always thanking God for what ye do receive. And see that ye have faith, hope, and charity, and then ye always will abound in good works. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you from this day forward and forever. Amen. Amen. That's from Alma, chapter 5.
Thank you, Wanda. That was beautiful. Thank you.
You know, Wanda, that music sounded very Middle Eastern.
That's because I wrote it that way.
I thought so. Okay.
I wrote a lot of them with that. And here's one from Nephi, which I heard in my head the day that I was supposed to be voted on for the priesthood at Westerville congregation. At 5 o'clock in the morning, it woke me up. And here's what it says. I will go and do the things which the Lord commandeth. I will go and do the things which the Lord commandeth. For I know he giveth some commandments to the children of men, save he shall prepare a way for them, that they may accomplish the thing which he commands them, that they may accomplish the thing which he commands them. And then I sat up in bed and I said, hoist with my own petard.
I could almost hear Having the Gila there.
That's almost what it is, because I invented a dance to go with it, and a circle dance to go with it. Oh, that reminds me of an interesting other conversation I had with Clara. She said, do you know how the Indians make perfect circles? Does anyone know? She says, we form a circle with people the size of the circle we want, and we dance around the circle until we wear out the ground beneath us and form the circle. I thought that would be interesting to you. I can picture them forming that serpent by dancing down the hill.
Oh, yes.
One after the other till they wear the path of how they want the mound to be built.
Now, I have watched several YouTube presentations where the Indians march into an arena and they have the tom-toms going, or the drums, and they do get in a circle.
Yeah.
And
they always dance in a circle, and the hora is a circle in Hebrew.
Wow.
And the restoration of the sacred hoop is one of the most essential prophecies and anticipations across many nations.
Yeah.
Old traditions die hard, don't they?
They do.
And thank you, Ed, for your comment about it being a worshipful experience. I agree with you. It's been a worshipful experience to reread the book, and thank you, Wanda. I think you did a beautiful job of summarizing and providing this worshipful experience and capping it off with your song. Thank you very much. By my time, it's singing out to the conclusion. Good night, the Lord is watching you. Good night.
Sounds like he's losing the internet.
You. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night. May God bless you. As much evidences I did not. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Hi, Paul.
should have pointed out that next week we have
Somebody's messing with his signal.
I think his internet's
I think he lost
unstable.
the signal.
Yeah,
He was gonna share with us who was gonna be on next week, and I guess I didn't pay attention good to the email. I don't have that.
I can't remember. I saw it just a little while ago, but oh,
Okay. Well, good night, everybody. We will see you next week, hopefully. Have a safe week and stay healthy, everybody.
okay.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye.
night.
Hi.
Thank you again, Wanda. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Good
Yes,
night.
Wanda, the way you can tell a good book report is all the reactions of people who want to get the book.
That's true. I haven't done very many book reports, actually.
Well,
And